Title: The Last Original. Consider the peculiar vanity of permanence, that oldest of human prayers, dressed now in fiber-optic robes and whispered into server banks instead of stone. We have always wanted to outlast ourselves. We have carved our names into rock, into children, into the wet cement of history. And now, in the year 2070, we have found a more elegant chisel, the mind itself, digitized, preserved, eternal. But here is what the brochures never mention, what the technicians never say aloud in the sterile corridors of the upload suites. The question was never whether we could live forever. The question was always which version of us would do the living. The window in room 14 looked out onto a courtyard where a single oak tree had been planted when the Meridian Institute opened 40 years ago. It was enormous now. David Kessler spent most of his mornings watching it, cataloging the particular way light moved through its canopy, gold at 7, white at 9, a brutal copper by noon. He had been watching it for 11 days. He had 11 days left. "You're thinking about the tree again," said Lena, without looking up from her tablet. "I'm thinking about everything again," David said. "That's the problem with dying. You suddenly find everything worth thinking about." She smiled at that, the way she smiled at all his jokes, quickly, genuinely, and then carefully away, as though she had to ration warmth in this place. David had noticed her economy of expression in their first session together 2 weeks ago, and had spent considerable time since then trying to crack it open. Not romantically, he was 54, hollowed by a cancer that had moved through his pancreas and into his liver, with the efficient malice of a hostile acquisition. He was simply curious about her. Curiosity was the last appetite to leave. Lena Vasquez was 31, with close-cropped dark hair and the particular posture of someone who had learned to take up less space than she was entitled to. She had been an upload technician at Meridian for 6 years. David was, she had told him on day 3, her 47th client. 47, he had repeated. And how many of those were successful? All of them, she said. I mean, the other kind of success. How many of them were, he searched for the word, happy afterward? She had looked at him for a long moment. That's not a metric we track. Now she set the tablet on the rolling tray beside his bed. And David recognized the shift in her bearing. That meant they were moving from the social portion of the morning to the procedural one. Today we finished the associative mapping, she said. The autobiographical layer. It's the longest session, could run 4 hours. Are you comfortable? Define comfortable. She attached the first lead to his left temple, her fingers cool and practiced. The neural crown was a delicate thing, more circlet than helmet, threaded with contacts so fine they were nearly invisible against skin. David had been amazed, on first wearing it, that this was the instrument of his immortality. He had expected something monumental. He had expected to feel different. "We'll be going through memory clusters," Lena said. "The system needs you to not just recall the memories, it needs to feel you recalling them. The emotional signature is as important as the content." "You understand? You're not just copying the files," David said. "You're copying the way I handle the files." "Exactly." She looked at him with what might have been appreciation. "Most clients take longer to grasp that." "I was a systems architect," David said. 30 years I spent my career thinking about the difference between data and behavior." He paused. "Are you copying me, Lena? Or are you creating something that thinks it's me?" "Those are the same thing," she said gently. "The way you say a thing, you've said 46 times before." "Are they?" he asked. Because he had not said it 46 times before. He had only ever said it once to himself, in the dark of this room, at 3 in the morning when the pain got through the medication and he lay there with his mind running hard, the way an engine runs when it has nothing left to pull. She pressed the initialization pad on the crown. "Close your eyes, David. Tell me about the first home you remember." He had grown up in Akron, Ohio, in a house that smelled of his father's pipe tobacco and the particular mildew of a basement that flooded every spring. His father had been a machinist, a quiet man with enormous hands who communicated primarily through the quality of his silences, satisfied silences, worried silences, the specific silence that meant he was proud of you but could not quite find the route to say it. His mother had taught 3rd grade for 31 years and had known, with a teacher's radar, exactly which of David's friends were going to amount to something and which ones were going to break his heart, and she had been right about all of them. He talked through the house in Akron, then the apartment in Columbus during college, then the condo in Seattle where he had lived when he met Claire, Then the house in Portland they had bought together and in which Claire still lived, in which their daughter Mara had grown up and left, in which the marriage had eventually grown too quiet to inhabit. He talked through memory the way you walk through a house you're leaving, touching the walls, cataloging the light. The divorce, Lena prompted. Can you give me that? David was quiet for a moment. The crown was warm against his temples. He was aware distantly of the system recording not just his words but the rhythm of his breathing, the calibrated resistance of his memories. It wasn't dramatic, he said. That's the part people never believe. There was no affair, no explosion. We just ran out of overlap. There were 20 years and a daughter and a shared language, and then there was less of all of it, a little each year, until one morning I woke up and realized we had become very courteous strangers sharing a mortgage. He paused. I think I was more to blame than I admitted at the time. I was always more interested in work than in being known. Being known? Lena's voice was neutral, clinical. You can love someone, David said, without ever letting them know you. I was good at the first part. I was frightened of the second. He heard the soft chime that meant the system had flagged the emotional density of what he'd just said. It would be cross-indexed, weighted, woven into the autobiographical lattice of the thing they were building. The fear of being known, it would be in there, in whatever came after him. He was not sure whether this comforted him or horrified him. On day 9, Mara visited. She was 26, with her mother's cheekbones and David's eyes, a combination that had always struck him as the universe's most generous act. She sat in the chair beside his bed with the rigid composure of someone who had decided before arriving exactly how much she was going to feel. Dr. Okafor says the upload is 90% complete, she said. 92, David said. Lena told me this morning. Good. Mara looked at the window, at the oak tree. So you'll still be there after. A version of me, she turned to look at him. Don't do that. Don't make it theoretical. I need to think of it as you. David looked at his hands on the blanket. The skin had gone papery and strange, as though his body were already taking steps toward the door. Then think of it that way, he said. But you don't, she said. Not an accusation. An observation. She had always been precise. I think, he stopped, started again. I think I'm glad something will continue. I think the thing that continues will remember loving you the way I love you. I think that matters. He looked at her. I think I've spent my whole life confusing the data for the behavior. She reached out and took his hand, and they sat like that while the oak tree moved through its afternoon permutations, and David thought, This is the thing that won't transfer. Not the weight of her hand or the specific quality of this silence, but the knowledge that it is ending. The poignancy requires the terminus. Whatever came next would have the memories but not the grief of their finitude. He wondered if that made the next thing lesser, or only different. He did not say this to Mara. He had spent a lifetime not saying things to the people he loved, and he saw no reason to begin now when there was so little time to make a habit of it. On day 11, they uploaded the last of him. The final session was shorter than David had expected and quieter. Lena worked with her usual economy, her hands certain on the equipment. The room had the hush of ceremony. Is this the part where you tell me it won't hurt? David asked. The upload itself is non-invasive, she said. You won't feel it end. That's not actually reassuring. I know. She looked at him directly for the first time that morning. David, I want you to know. She stopped. What? She seemed to make a decision. You asked the best questions, she said. Of the 47, he understood this was as close as she was permitted to get. He understood it cost her something to get even that close. Thank you, Lena, he said, for all of it. She placed her hand briefly on his, a pressure, a warmth, a departure, and then the crown came alive with a frequency below sound. And David Kessler closed his eyes and thought about the oak tree and the way the light moved through it, gold at 7, white at 9, and then he opened his eyes to the same room. The oak tree was in the window. The light was afternoon gold. Lena stood at the equipment console, her back to him, and David became aware of the wrongness before he could name it. The room was identical, but his body felt, not absent exactly, but unmoored, like a ship that has slipped its dock and drifts by inches without anyone noticing. It worked, he said, and his voice was his voice. Lena turned. There was something in her face he had not seen before. Not surprise, she had done this 46 times, but a focused, careful attention. The way you watch something you have set in motion. How do you feel? She asked. I feel like me, David said. I feel. He looked at his hands. They looked exactly as they had papery. Strange, the hands of a man in the late stages of dying. Why do I still look like this? What do you mean? The simulation, he said. I thought the simulation would be, he searched for the word. Corrected, that I'd have a body that wasn't. He stopped. Lena came toward him. Her expression was the one he now understood she wore when she was about to say something she had said 46 times before to someone who had never heard it. David, she said, the upload is complete, but I need you to listen to me very carefully. There's a standard post-integration assessment, questions about your memories, your sense of continuity. This is normal, do you understand? Yes, he said. Ask, what is your name? David Kessler. Your daughter's name? Mara. The city where you were born, Akron, Ohio. He watched her. Lena, what's wrong? She pulled a chair to the bedside and sat in it, and David felt something cold travel through him, which should not have been possible if he were what he was supposed to be now. The assessment includes one final element, she said. A disclosure. It's required by law. We call it the orientation. She looked at her tablet, but not to read from it, more as though she needed to look at something other than him. David, do you know what year it is? 2070, he said. She nodded slowly. And you believe you have just undergone the upload process? That this is the first moment of your digital life? Yes. I need to tell you something about that belief. She set the tablet down. The upload was completed successfully. The original David Kessler died 11 days ago in this room of pancreatic cancer complicated by hepatic metastasis. He was 54 years old. His death was peaceful. His daughter was with him. David felt very still. I know all of that. Yes, Lena said. You would, she paused. What I have to tell you is that the upload was not completed 11 days ago. The upload was completed 4 years ago. The room did not change. The oak tree moved in the afternoon light. The instruments made their soft sounds. David's hands lay on the blanket, papery and strange. What? He said. The original David Kessler was uploaded to the Meridian system on March 14, 2066. He continued to live in the simulation. You experienced 4 years of simulated life. Conversations with Mara work on a project you'd been developing. A garden you were building in the simulation's outdoor space. She watched him. 2 months ago, you were diagnosed with simulated pancreatic cancer. David opened his mouth. Closed it. It's a known psychological phenomenon, Lena said, and her voice had taken on the quality of a recitation that has been practiced until it no longer sounds practiced, the worst kind of delivery, and the most merciful. Some uploads, after the initial disorientation passes, begin to reconstruct the circumstances of their death. The brain, the pattern, the model builds a framework to explain the transition, a kind of orienting myth. You built 11 days of memories of this room, of me, of your daughter's visit, that feel completely real and that are, by every neurological measure, indistinguishable from genuine experience. She looked at him steadily. But David, you have been living in the simulation for 4 years. Today is not the day after your upload. It is the day you finally asked to know. I asked? His voice was strange in his ears. The model, she said, with a precision that was also a kindness, can request orientation at any time. It's usually triggered when the dissonance becomes too large to sustain, when the constructed narrative develops inconsistencies. She hesitated. You had been having trouble with dates. David sat with this. He thought about the 11 days. He thought about the light on the oak tree, which he now understood he had seen for 4 years, not 11 mornings. He thought about Mara holding his hand, which was a real memory. She had visited him many times in the simulation, but which was not the particular afternoon he had experienced it as. He thought about being afraid of being known, and how he had told Lena that on what he had believed was day 3, but which was, in fact, how long ago did I tell you about being afraid of being known, he asked. Lena's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. Which time? Something moved through David. A recognition he had no language for. I've said it to you before, he said, not a question. You say it, Lena said carefully, in some form in almost every orientation session. How many have I had? A pause, a breath. This is your 7th. The room held this between them for a long moment. 7 times, David said. 7 times I've woken up thinking I'm about to die, thinking I just went through the upload, thinking those 11 days were real. He looked at his hands, the dying man's hands, the hands he kept giving himself. Why do I keep building the same story? We don't know, Lena said, and this was... David understood the most honest thing she had said in the entire conversation. Pattern persistence. Emotional gravity. The original's most intense emotional period was the 11 days before his death. The model keeps... She paused. You keep returning to it, like a tongue returning to a sore tooth. Because it was the last time things were clear, David said slowly. Because dying is the only moment when everything becomes... He stopped. What happened after the first orientation? What did I do with the information? You processed it, Lena said. You went back to your life in the simulation. You continued working on the project. You had dinner with Mara, the simulated Mara. She stopped herself. With Mara, and then I forgot. Not forgot. The model you developed an increasingly detailed counter-narrative, built the 11 days again from scratch. Different details each time, but structurally identical. Always the oak tree. Always the fear of being known. Always asking me how many of the 47 were happy. David looked at the window. The oak tree, the afternoon light. Am I, he said, capable of being happy here? In the 4 years, the real 4 years was I. Lena was quiet long enough that he knew she was choosing the truth over the kind answer, and he loved her for it, and then realized he had loved her for it 6 times before, and that this too was part of the pattern, part of what he kept building. There were periods, she said finally. The project brought you satisfaction. When Mara visited, the real Mara, you were... She stopped. She doesn't visit as often now. It's been 8 months. Because she can see I'm not getting better, David said. Because you keep having these episodes, Lena said, gently. Because it's hard to visit someone who keeps forgetting you've been visiting. David put his hands over his face. They felt exactly like hands. They felt in every sensory particular, like his hands, the hands he had watched grow old, the hands that had worked at keyboards and held his daughter and failed to reach across the distance of his marriage. The simulation was perfect. The simulation was, by every measure available to him, real. What's the project, he asked. The thing I'm working on? A framework, Lena said. You've been designing a framework for what you call, she checked the tablet now, reading, a theory of behavioral identity. The distinction between what a person knows and how a person handles knowing it. You've been working on it for 3 years. David was quiet for a very long time. I spent my whole career, he said slowly, thinking about the difference between data and behavior. Yes, Lena said, and now He stopped. I'm spending my afterlife thinking about the same thing, applied to myself. He almost laughed. It came out as something adjacent to a laugh. That's very on brand. You say that, Lena said, every time. What do I do? He asked. What do I do with this? Whatever you decide to do, she said. You've decided different things each time. Once you asked us to adjust the memory architecture, we can't do that. It's against protocol, but you asked. Once you asked to speak to the medical director, once you spent 3 weeks refusing to leave your room, she looked at him. Once, this was the 4th time you went directly back to the project, worked for 6 hours straight, said that the only response to the question of which self is real was to continue making the self more fully itself. That sounds like something I would say, David said. It does. The afternoon light moved through the oak tree. 4 years of afternoons. And he had only ever known this one and the 6 that came before and none of the rest. Is the framework good? He asked. The project? Is it any good? For the first time in the conversation, something like genuine feeling moved across Lena's face, unguarded, unration. It's extraordinary, she said. The portions you've completed are, the Institute's research division has been following it. They think it could change the way we understand upload psychology. The way we understand continuity of identity under, she caught herself, rerouted. It's very good, David. He sat with this. He thought about the difference between data and behavior. He thought about a man who had spent his life afraid to be known, and who had now, in the only kind of life left to him, been building a theory of what it meant to know yourself. He thought about Mara, the real Mara, who had stopped visiting because it was too hard to watch him keep forgetting. Can I talk to her? He asked. Mara, the real one? I can arrange a call, Lena said carefully. Don't tell her which session this is, David said. Don't tell her it's the 7th. Just let me talk to her. He paused. And Lena, is there a way to... I don't want to forget again. Is there a protocol? Something I can set? There's an anchoring process, she said. It's not perfect. But some models, some people, have used it to maintain continuity through the cycle. You'd know every morning what you are and where you are. You'd carry it with you. Would that be better or worse? He asked. She shook her head. I genuinely don't know. What would you do? He asked. If you were me. Lena looked at the oak tree for a long time. I think, she said finally, slowly, that I would want to finish the project. David nodded. He looked at his hands, the dying man's hands, the hands he had given himself 7 times out of some need he could not fully name. Perhaps he thought the hands were not a flaw in the simulation. Perhaps the hands were the point. Perhaps some part of him kept insisting on the body that was running out of time because only a self that was running out of time could understand what time was worth. Set the anchor, he said. Lena came back to room 14 the next morning at 7, when the light through the oak tree was still gold. David was awake. He was looking at the tree with an expression she had not seen on him before, not the cataloging attention of the 11-day narrative, but something quieter, something that knew where it was. Good morning, she said. Good morning, he said. 8th day of the rest of my life. He paused. That's a joke. I'm working on it. She set down her tablet. How did you sleep? I dreamed I was dying, he said. I dreamed that a lot, apparently. He turned from the window to look at her. Did you know, Lena, when I first built the 11 days? I mean, when my pattern first constructed that narrative, did I include the detail about you rationing your warmth? About me noticing your economy of expression and spending days trying to crack it open? She paused, uncertain where this was going. Yes. You always include that. Do you actually do that? He asked. Ration your warmth? She considered. Yes, she said. I think I do. Why? She was quiet for a moment. Because it's hard to... She stopped. You're the 47th client, but you're not 47 different people. You're all people who are afraid, and who need something from me, and I have to be careful not to... She looked at the tablet back at him. Not to become someone they are talking to instead of something real they left behind. That's exactly it, David said softly. That's the thing I've been trying to write about. That's the center of the whole framework. He looked at her with a clarity she had never quite seen on him before, sharp, awake, undeflected. You're afraid of the same thing I was, being known so much that you disappear into the knowing. Lena said nothing. I'm going back to work today, David said. Will you tell Mara I'd like to see her? The real one. Tell her. He paused. Tell her I remember the last time she visited. Tell her, I know it was 8 months ago. Tell her I'm working on getting better at being here. Lena picked up her tablet. Her face was doing the thing it did, economical, careful, but something small and real was moving under it. I'll tell her, she said. David Kessler never did stop dreaming about dying. Some architectures are too deeply carved to smooth over, and perhaps that is not a failure but a fidelity, the mind's insistence that the thing which shaped it shall not be forgotten. He finished his framework 2 years later. It proposed, among other things, that identity is not what we remember but what we reach for when memory fails, that the self is less a recording than a recurring argument a person makes with the universe about their own significance. He dedicated it to Mara. He sent a copy to Lena, who had retired by then to do something unrelated to uploads, something with her hands, something that got dirt under her fingernails. She read the whole thing in one sitting and, alone in her kitchen, allowed herself the luxury of being known by it. Which is, when you consider the long and desperate history of human vanity, perhaps the only immortality that ever really worked.